Men who instinctively take personal responsibility for themselves and their families eventually realize that being atomized, rootless cosmopolitans inhibits their ability to exercise their willpower. Male agency naturally leads into the creation of a patriarchy. Raise your sons to be strong, masculine and dominant. Raise your daughters to be soft, feminine and submissive. The bad behavior that we see for women today is simply a rebellion against men's failure to benevolently dominate. The failure of Western society is a failure to maintain the patriarchy.
But the patriarchy is coming back. Welcome once again to our 16th, I believe, episode of Patriarch Hour. I'm your host, James Fox Higgins, with our great patriarch, Noah Revoy. How are you, Noah?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
Excellent. Now we're in for a treat tonight, folks. We're going to have mostly Australians joining us because of the crazy late hour in the United States, but we have with us tonight a presidential hopeful for the 2024 campaign. And I've talked to a lot of young people who are considering running for public office, particularly in Australia. And I get people coming to me often saying they want to be interviewed on my show and whatnot. And often I just sort of find that they're just another shade of the same kind of colors that we often see in political office, and it's rare to be truly intrigued by somebody. But when I spoke to our guest of tonight on Facebook when he was first introduced to me, I knew nothing about him, and I said, "Tell me your one sentence elevator pitch for your presidential campaign platform." And he said, "The restoration of America to a Christian theocracy." And I was like, bro, you had me at hello. So let's welcome him right in. We have Daryl Kane here for the 2024 presidential run. Daryl, welcome to Patriarch Hour.
God bless you both. Thank you so much for having me. The intro alone gave me goosebumps, keying in on so many critical issues in such a brief intro. So I'm very honored to be here, and I'll give your audience the same preface that I gave you, which is that it is 4 a.m. for me here. So I will do my best to provide some meaningful answers to the discussion, and honored and humbled to be here with two such tremendous, fine young gentlemen.
Thank you very much for calling us young.
Yeah, we'll take it. I'll take it. Now, what I think would be prudent would be for our followers who may not have heard of you, is if you could give us an expanded pitch, because I just watched your debate today that you had some time ago with Adam Kokesh, which I found thoroughly entertaining. Not for reasons that Mr. Kokesh would like, but what I did like was that you rolled out your platform very succinctly, and it was just like like 50 punches to the head in one breath, because you are dealing with things that nobody in mainstream politics seems to be willing to deal with at the moment. Why don't you lay it out for us, and then we'll just get into some back and forth for the remainder of the hour.
Sure. So what we really very much want to do, and what I'm very big on, is sort of normalizing Western politics. I don't view myself as some sort of extreme right wing. I sort of view myself as sort of a centrist. Now, certainly in today's paradigm, socially conservative is someone that thinks that men should be prohibited from using women's restrooms. So I think it's important to sort of throw a little bit of cold water right in the face of what's going on, and just reassert some very basic traditional things, protecting children from sexual deviancy, and restoring normalcy, removing propaganda from entertainment, and really what we've seen from the Republican Party, which obviously is in the United States the de facto resistance movement against the rise of the satanic theocracy of the left, is a very feckless and ineffectual platform that is based on response and defense rather than attack and proaction. So my platform is not concerned with holding ground. We have football here in America. I love European football and Australian football as well, but in American football, it's very much a territorial game. And they're playing defense, and there's nothing left to defend. And it's very much time for conservatism to move into an offensive mode and to start taking enemy territory. And in order to do that, I think that we have to reorganize ourselves away from this traditional model of big government versus small government, which is really becoming less and less relevant, and really looking at things in terms of relation to God, God's word, and God's hierarchical order, as opposed to rebellion and Luciferianism. So there's a lot of things that I do that are outside of the mold. And I think that the Republican Party, you're going to see, as the demographic shifts continue to evolve, you're going to see that it puts an increasing pressure on the Republican Party to adapt and transform. And sort of my approach is the inverse of what they've been doing, which is to surrender on culture. And I sort of attack on culture and I'm more progressive in economic ways. Things like healthcare, for example, in the United States, I sort of joke around the one thing that the Republican Party has succeeded in doing is convincing the American people that having access to healthcare is some egregious encroachment upon their rights, when, really, certainly healthcare is not a right, but neither are roads and public schools. We do pay taxes. I have parents. We all have parents. Certainly the free market, there's this sort of free market fixes everything. And perhaps in enough time, the free market fixes all of these things. But, for steel workers in the Rust Belt, they don't have 30 or 40 years for the free market to lower premiums when they're being offered healthcare plans at 3 times the rate of their mortgages. They need access now. And I don't think that this is a ridiculous and absurd thing for government to do. I know that for a lot of conservatives, this is something that doesn't jive well with them. But I think that some of these programs, as we move to a more robust and proactive and paternal government, as opposed to what we have right now, we have a very big government, but it's incentivizing cancerous things. I think that at this point, to just sort of go to an austerity mode of just, hey, let's just return to constitutionality and just, total ceasefire on these things. The problem is that the damage that's been inflicted on Western nations is so severe that even a full ceasefire at this point in time essentially would leave the countries to bleed on their own. So we need some robust, proactive, paternal government to sort of reinforce things and push things in the right direction. So a lot of the things, a lot of my initiatives, I sort of joke around sometimes when I run out of ideas, I just sort of look at what the left is championing and I kind of propose doing the opposite. So you have all of these diversity officers and these types of things. So I think that the Republican movement should be asserting the inverse of that. We should be talking about homogeny visas as opposed to diversity visas and stuff of that nature. So I do look, and it is easy. And I think one thing that's very good is that we have a very hip and insightful young generation of young Americans, because kind of the older conservatives, the boomers that are on their way out, they're here for another decade or two, and they're just looking to get by without being hassled too much. But if you're a 15-year-old young American or young Australian, and you're looking out at the trends at place in your nation and in your world, and you're thinking, gosh, how the heck am I going to put a life together for myself? These sort of approaches are becoming increasingly less and less relevant. And what you're seeing, as we always have in moments of history, when you have great chaos, it's only natural that there is an order that comes in after that. And that order is not necessarily good. Order is divine order, proper order is obviously a very good and correct thing. But what you have now, you have this thing, the left are the real fascists. And we joke about that, but there is a very strong, aggressive authoritarian. To me, I see it more as a satanic theocracy. And I do actually view that the left is further along in realizing the next step, which is there is going to be some large authority, because people are disoriented, they're frustrated on both sides of the aisle. And when you have that, inevitably there's going to be a larger power that's coming in. So really what is incumbent upon the conservative movements is that we have to recognize what is occurring, and we have to recognize that it's our responsibility to realize that full authoritarian power before the left does. And that's the moment in history that we're at. So I think that what I'm a part of when I'm broadcasting and projecting is very much naturally occurring. And I think by the time we arrive at 2024, really the nation and the world is going to be quite in line with where our platform is. This is the natural flow of history, and this is the natural evolution of the conservative movement. And it is our destiny to seize control of our national conservative parties and movements. So I'm very much in favor of things like federal ban on pornography. That's a big thing that I'm all about. And, there's a little bit of hand wringing with conservatives and, what about freedom of speech? And I don't have time for these kind of arguments. I want to get rid of these things. And I very much welcome the opportunity to draw a line in the sand on these issues, because I think that really, I think people are going to see that they're going to want to side with the people that aren't into these things. I don't think that Charlie Kirk defending the right to pornography is going to be a particularly moving rallying cry in 2024 to the grassroots of the Republican Party. So, we have a lot of confidence about what we're doing. And certainly I always say that ultimately it is all in God's hands. It's incumbent upon us to do our best. But I am very confident. We are very confident. We feel very good about where we're at, where we're moving as a country, and we feel well positioned to take over in 2024.
Fantastic. Well, there's so much to get into there, and I'll just start by pointing out that in what I saw today in your debate with Adam Kokesh is that the libertarian position, not surprisingly, but also the mainstream sort of old school conservative position on pornography is that it's just a natural consequence of our wonderful right to freedom of speech, and nobody's forcing you to watch pornography. But what we know in reality is that its availability is an act of aggression against our young people, that we're actually ill-equipped to protect them. We don't have the means to stop our children from being exposed to this culturally and spiritually cancerous product. It is like heroin for children, and it's being handed out for free legally with total impunity. And so I get very I was very fired up hearing you speak so boldly and passionately about really stepping into those circles, if when you take the White House, and holding to some sort of justice the people who have harmed the American children in this way. And we are the generation who grew up in the broadband age. I remember life before the internet, but only just. And it's been a new problem that, of course, nobody could have foreseen in the times of writing the Constitution, and it has been one of the main forces in degrading Christian morality for not just America, but for the entire world, because we are subjects of the US empire. So I'm very glad to hear that you're willing to take that on, as well as Hollywood. And I wonder if you would speak a bit about your interest in, let's say, forceful reform in Hollywood.
Yeah, so one of the things I've pledged on day one in my administration is boots on the ground in Hollywood, and this is very much connected to what we talk about there. Preserving the innocence of our children, restoring the innocence of our children is really going to be the top priority of my administration. And this is very common sense stuff. There is a very big difference between throwing gays off of buildings and protecting children from them, and we need to reassert that line in the sand. And those of us that stood strongly in defense of traditional marriage very clearly understood what that line meant, because what you're doing is you're equating a same-sex couple, when you do that, to a mother and a father couple. The institution of marriage is about children. It's about reinforcing the family structure, which is the bedrock of civilization. The breakdown of the family is the core issue, essentially right behind the turning away from God. And you can break these things down biblically. These things naturally occur. But step one is, as you guys identify, men turning away from their responsibility of being stewards of the household. Your opening really resonated with me, because I really don't have a lot of time to listen to young men just complaining about the behavior of women. The two things are interconnected. The poor behavior of women, if you believe in hierarchies, if you believe in a masculine authority and responsibility, clearly if your women are misbehaving, that is a reflection upon you as men. So it starts with us as men. We are at the head of the table, and restoring order starts with us. And our generation, we are the CEO generation, is what I like to say, because the buck has to stop with us. We all have been subjected to all of these various things. The boomer generation, our parents, all of these new things that they decided that they would try out against the thousands of years of tradition that got us to where we were. And we all grew up with various issues, and we're very different. We're very quote unquote diverse on an individual basis. A lot of people have tattoos, and a lot of us, we have this or that. And my big thing is that we have to assert our standards. We have to assert these things and not be afraid of it. A very big thing with the left is they want everybody to be touched by the degeneracy, so that you take it personally if somebody talks against it. You know, my brother, my daughter is this or that, so therefore, you know, I now have to evolve to that side instead of actually doing the right thing, which is standing for values. We are human beings. We are all, as we are in a fallen state, we are all fundamentally incapable of conquering sin in this form. Sin has been conquered through our Savior Christ, and by his grace, we are able to enter in and transcend sin, but sin is always going to be a problem in the human condition. So, you know, the big thing is that there's been this desire to now bring everything to conform it to our personal sins, our personal baggage. We all have a lot of baggage, and we all have to work through it together. So it's very important that we all support each other in our journeys. So if you're a person and you read something that I write about tattoos, and you have tattoos and that bugs you, you know, you have to understand that I'm not perfect. Okay. I'm, you know, I have just as many things going on as you that I'm working to get through, but our generation, we all have to, and I think that we're all recognizing this. It's all happening naturally. We're all being very supportive of each other, and that's exactly what we need to do. So went off on a little bit of a tangent. When we go into Hollywood, obviously we have an entire culture that is toxic, degrading, and cancerous. It is completely 180 degrees away from what is good. We have Disney teaching children about homosexuality at ages 5 and 6. This is fundamentally unacceptable. This is a perfect example of something where free market principles are not sufficient. Glenn Beck making a channel with a couple $1 million and making a couple Christian movies here or there, this is not going to break the Hollywood apparatus. And I started my young adult life in Hollywood. I was involved in the occult there for some time as well. So, you know, I had a very close, you know, and I know many people, no, not many people. I know I have a handful of contacts in Hollywood that are people that you know that have been in movies and TV shows. And to a name, all of them, specifically the young men, all report being sexually abused as young children. This is a big topic now that I've been discussing for years, and people are now talking and understanding the reality of it. And obviously we want to talk about stopping that, but that is a part of it. I mean, that is the ugliest part of it, is the fact that, yes, these people prey upon children, but the larger scale is that the entire industry is degrading and propagandizing and stealing the innocence of children and steering them down. You have a global apparatus emanating out of Hollywood that is exporting all these backwards values to the entire world. And frankly, this is why there's some hostility to the United States. It's not all about the fact that we have bases and so many. There's also a lot of resentment about this because all people understand this. And this also goes back to what is your playbook electorally? And, you know, we have the demographic shifts that are occurring in all of the nations. This, again, an act of warfare by the left. This is unprecedented what is occurring in the nations in terms of these changes and stuff all being championed deliberately. And, you know, the Republican response is, how do we react to this? How do we make our platform appeal to these new groups? And, you know, my platform kind of looks at it the opposite. I want to go for the low-hanging fruit. So a traditional Republican model says, okay, so we've gotten 60% of white support and we get 70% of white men. So we're doing good there. So now let's move to the 8% of African Americans that support us and get them to 9%. I look at it completely opposite. I look at a Democratic Party whose entire platform is predicated upon hatred of whites and men. And to me, if you're getting 60% support from whites and the entire party's platform is about replacing them, that represents a massive underperformance. So my first priority obviously is to gobble up more there. So I want to see those numbers more like 70 or 80%. But also there are genuine members in all communities that traditional values speak to. And so my firewall with that is not pandering to these people and going into their communities and trying to explain to them the values of meritocracy. My way of connecting with people all around the world, as I've always done, and I do always say that the golden rule must always remain supreme, that we do have all of these larger things. There's a micro and there's a macro. The macro is we have to restore our nations. Micro is when you meet a person, you treat that person with respect until they give you a reason not to, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. And, you know, we can balance these two things. And the way that we do that is by asserting proper platforms. But our firewall with these communities actually is our heavy emphasis on faith. If you really want to drive up these communities, you go in there and you talk deliberately, you draw a line in the sand about transsexuals reading to children. This is a topic that resonates to people all around the world because it is so plainly good versus evil. And we're moving into an increasingly binary dynamic, and the veil is being lifted, and it's becoming very obvious. This is a battle between good and evil. So as a candidate, my job is going to be to actually rush to the end and draw that line in the sand and let people separate themselves in accordance to that. And I'm confident that there are enough members in these new communities, in conjunction with our improving the support within whites and men. And another thing that occurs also is that when you focus on men and improving men, that elevates the rest of the electorate. Because when men are behaving better and men are adopting better attitudes, they're forming families. And obviously, as we know, again, the left is so much better at looking at how do we transform the electorate. The Republicans are about responding to that. So I don't want to respond to how do we appeal to all of these single women in their 30s. I want to say, how do we get all of these single women in their 30s married to good Christian men so that they become the married women that vote Republican? So by leading with the men, this is going to have a positive ripple effect that's going to transform the electorate. And then we have things like Kane Care, which is national health care for all good faith citizens that are doing the correct things. This is something that transforms on a general election. This transforms the map for the rest of the country. So this is how I intend to offset these changes. Now, Hollywood obviously being the purveyor of these things, this is very simple. I don't have time. This is an act of war, and the United States is at war, and they are being attacked from all angles. You can't even watch a basketball game anymore in the country without having the propaganda. You have corporate America, you have the academic institutions, you have everything in the United States organized around pushing these values, and it's incumbent upon the President of the United States to defend the American people from that, however necessary. And one thing that I do give President Obama credit for is that he was very effective at leveraging the bully pulpit. And this is something that, and I was out in Washington, I was at Trump Towers, Trump Hotel or whatever last week. I saw Eric and Laura out there. And one thing that, that I mentioned in passing was, and look, for whatever misgivings or concerns we may have about this administration not going far enough, it's still very important that we support the best that we have at the time in front of us. And, my advice is to use the power of the bully pulpit, because he is the one person in the country that cannot be silenced. And I think that he could do more to actually attack the premise directly. And it's very, very important that you have a president of the United States that's going to be leading with these things. And Barack Obama was very good. He could construe any crisis to fit his agenda. And when he would identify a victim, he would supersede law to protect them. So we're going to protect our children, and we're going to do whatever is necessary to protect our children. And we have the authority from the Bible, from God, and from Christ as a Christian nation to do that, and that authority supersedes within the Constitution. Now, we do have great lawyers, because I'm not a lawyer or specialist, and this is their job. They can explain and write away how we do all these things, but we're going to do these things. By hook or by crook, these things have to be done, and under a Kane administration, they will be done.
Is it? There is actually, I really like the very first part that you talked about changing from being in a defensive mode to an offensive mode. And we have a historical example of that here in Europe. I'm living in Portugal, so I'm in the part of Europe that was at one point under Muslim occupation. About half of Europe was. And there were times when specific invasions went up to almost take all of Europe within Muslim control. The reason that was able to happen is because they played defense for hundreds of years. They would give concessions. They would play defense. They basically gave their kingdoms away one step at a time until there was too much of a foothold in Europe in order to defend it anymore. And it wasn't until a lot of times it was younger kings that took over from their parents and decided, we're going to go on the offensive. And militarily, it looked like a foolish idea. They were tremendously outnumbered. In Portugal, where I live, Dom Afonso Henriques had 300 soldiers versus dozens of cities full of tens of thousands of Muslim soldiers. And yet he reconquered halfway down the country in his lifetime. And the reason that he did it is because he went constantly on the offensive. He leveraged what they had. They realized they didn't have to hold ground. They had to weaken the enemy. They had to undermine the enemy's position such that people in general were no longer supporting the enemy. And what we've allowed, or not we, but conservatives have allowed, is for the leftist position to get legitimized. The position that it's okay to have people who are known child predators in some cases spending time with children, reading them, dressing them up as opposite genders. These type of things, our ancestors would have said, that doesn't matter what the law says, that ain't going to happen in my city. But we allowed the leftist position that these things would be okay. We allowed the slippery slope to happen to a point where they became legitimate points for discussion. It wasn't a matter of stop this at all costs. You didn't have to convince men 100 years ago to go down to their local library and physically stop this from happening. You just had to let them know it was happening. They would have been all over it. So we have to change the discussion. We have to change people's cultural viewpoint of what is acceptable and what isn't. And it really, you hit the nail on the head. It's up to improving men, because we're the ones that set the boundaries and the borders in society. Women are by nature very agreeable, and that makes them very susceptible to propaganda. Men, and not all men, but especially the half of men that are on the higher disagreeability scale, our job in society is to say enough, no more, it stops here. And we have to get men back on that and make it acceptable again for men to say no, for men to say, this isn't going to happen, and I'm going to resist it with whatever it takes. And that's really, I think, a cultural as well as a political issue. And it's not going to happen only at the grassroots. We need people publicly talking about this and publicly championing men standing up, not for themselves. That's actually more or less acceptable, but standing up for their community and their commons. We have a stake in what other people are doing. Their actions affect us. There are costs to allowing degeneracy to grow and take hold in our communities. And it's about time that we stop allowing that cost to accumulate. I'm very curious what your plans are to help reinvigorate, especially young men, to have them again start to take that strong stand, and what types of programs you think would work to encourage young men to get the spirit back again that they need to go and stand up for themselves and for their communities.
Yeah, so we want, again, and just absolutely so on point, so critical. It starts young. So, I mean, we have a culture that is really gone out of its way to demoralize and degrade young men. And, we're going to do a lot of things. And one thing I'm very big on is participation in sport, more or less going to be mandatory starting in public schools for young men, perhaps with an opt-out for medical purposes. There's a lot of resentment towards sport now, and it's understandable. It's become corrupted, as everything is. It's been politicized. And, it's essentially become just a display of thuggery and, rampant thuggery and bodacious thuggery. And what we are going to do is actually just, rather than retreat into video games and Call of Duty, we're going to just restore normalcy. And we're going to have a lot of programs. We're going to incentivize traditional families. Really important having the father in the household. We've had a government system that has really gone out of way to remove men from the household, to remove their authority. And, it is a two-sided thing, because, there's a big movement about father's rights and what occurs in divorce court and all of this stuff. And it's very true. This is not, men do not have equal protection under the law. But, this whole thing started with, men wanting to maybe not have to be responsible for all these things. And maybe I want to get divorced and, re-explore what it was like being in my 20s and living as a bachelor. And, we want to get the family back on course. So we have a government system that does the opposite. So not only did we remove the intact family or household requirement for things like welfare, but now, I know people that, they have members in their family that decided not to get married because they would receive less benefits as a married couple than the benefits that she receives as a single mother. And the traditional conservative approach is, okay, so obviously that's wrong. We need to stop that. Yes, we need to stop that, but we also need to replace it with the opposite. We need to heavily incentivize traditional families, intact families, mother and father families. Starts there, having the father in the household, having him incentivized to do the right things. One thing I've toyed with is, like Andrew Yang's universal basic income, kind of a universal intact Christian family basic income. So some basic income for families and we're going to be asserting, again, Christian authority as a nation. We're going to be asserting that we are a Christian nation, and there's going to have to be a process. And I'm not, I'm a person, I'm someone that evolved into Christianity in my late 20s, very passively as a young man, but I would not really consider myself even a legitimate Christian until I got into my mid 20s and tried all sorts of other things and realized that, my way wasn't going to work. And I had to get on my knees and ask Christ for forgiveness. And that was a turning point in my life. And so many of our followers have very intense opinions about the denominations. And, there's a conversation that we're going to have, but we're going to have to identify what are the core tenets of Christianity as a nation, and it is a challenge-based theocracy. Women respond to encouragement, but men need to be challenged. So I'm not someone that hates the Joel Osteens of the world, but I don't think that that's what men need to be hearing. Maybe it's something for the women to have on during the day at the home, but men need to be challenged, and we need a proper Christian tradition in the nation. So, certainly things like Episcopalianism, where you have, same-sex marriages being performed by cross-dressers, that is not Christianity. So we need to assert a proper sense of what that Christian identity is, and then we need to start incentivizing families for participating in that. So, all of these things and sports are so important. I'm someone, I love sports. I mean, I played soccer my entire life and many other sports, and it is very heartbreaking to me to see what's occurred and seeing the attitudes of this from young men. I want young guys out playing sports. I don't want to see 12, 13, 14-year-old kids in ski masks, training in militias before they're throwing footballs to their neighbors. I want to restore that traditional sense. And, we all know that meme of what right-wing extremism looks like, and it's these Norman Rockwell paintings. And, I think that we have we tend to see some selective attitudes where people will get on board with removing this or that. We have to understand that you don't get that aesthetic as a society, getting rid of some of these things, but, playing video games and smoking pot every day at the same time. We have to really draw a line in the sand. And sports are so important because they teach men how to socialize, how to work as a team, how to compete, and how to do that in a positive and productive way. So that's something, all of these things, and we have a lot of ideas for academic reform. Obviously, academic reform, as I've said, starts with prosecution. I mean that quite literally. Gender theory curriculum, to me, is not some goofy thing. That is sexual abuse of minors. And that's all. I'll define it from the executive level, and I will prosecute it accordingly. So the first thing, obviously, we have to do is remove the 97% of the current crop of academics that are just fundamentally unfit to be around children, get them working with their hands somewhere. And then we want to put in a proper pro-American, pro-Christian Western tradition. And, part of that will be some prayer time. And, I think that prayer time perhaps should be separated between boys and girls, that there should be a difference there. And there should be some time set aside in the actual classroom for boys to participate in sport and, for girls to participate in something else, something that's enriching to them. So I'll admit I haven't put too much thought into what the girls will do while we're playing basketball or whatever, but we'll certainly figure that out. So I want to start ordering a proper society, starting very young with proper education and having a culture that reinforces these traditional values. And you start doing these things, and don't tell me that this stuff can't be done. I mean, we had the Hays Codes, and certainly some things like, you cannot depict couples from, different ethnicities together. I mean, you can understand that some of that stuff got removed, but now you sort of, again, you talk about how we've normalized things, and then so quickly the normalization leads to the enforcement of not allowing the opposite. And now, actually, in Hollywood, not only do we not have these standards, but now we actually have the opposite. Now we have mandatory demonstrations of positive depictions of homosexuality, for example, mandated quotas. So we want to go back to putting in positive quotas to keep the society going in the right direction. So we do these things unilaterally, on all the places. So, for example, in the NBA now, it says Black Lives Matter on the court. So, when I'm president, if they want to televise their games, it's going to say Christ is King on the court. Okay. And it's going to say Christ is King on their jerseys. And it's going to say God bless the United States of America on their jerseys. And if people don't want to stand for our national anthem, they're not going to be playing in our leagues because it's a privilege. And if we don't have commissioners that are going to enforce that, we're going to remove them. And we have every right to do that. When they do things like, they don't have an all-star game in the state of North Carolina because they don't feel comfortable about their restroom bills that prohibit men from using women's restrooms. So, they've opened the door of authority. So now, the tech stuff, now they're in this very nebulous game of actually, we're going to flag things if they're factually inaccurate. And this is a very dangerous thing to do when your entire worldview is built upon lies, because you've now provided us, the president, when we're in charge, to actually say, well, we're going to assert authority and we're going to flag and remove things that are untruthful. And the truth is that Jesus Christ is King. So we're going to flag and remove the other things. So there is going to be some allowance for other things. It's not, we do have, a right to religious expression. Certainly if there's a religion that has something fundamentally built into it that is diametrically opposed to Western civilization, we're going to look at that differently. But, it's not that we're going to be going into people's homes and telling them how they participate in faith, but as a nation in our schools, on our TVs, we're going to be asserting our Christian faith. And, and if people don't want to participate in that, perhaps they can opt out in that. But if the last 50 years has shown us anything, it's that, there is perhaps other ways for other people, but for America, for the West, the way that God is here is Christianity. And if there's something that's going to get us out of here, it's Christianity. And I know a lot of people that have very radical views that have some support for overlap with us on some of these things. Some of them are agnostic and sort of they lose us at this point because they're just going to go into Christianity and we have so many things and this situation is so dire and so ridiculous and they want to go to this. And the truth is, yes, things are very dire. And the fact is that the only thing that can actually save our nations at this point in time is an act of God. And the first thing to do as a nation is to repent and ask for God's forgiveness. And if you are a person of faith, you understand that God can do all things. So it starts with that. And then it starts with, again, just using all of the precedents that they've established. And I look at this, how do we get back to having national identities? Well, we get back to their using the exact same nonviolent methods that got us to where we are. So instead of having global communities talking about how we remove whites from Western nations, we're going to have global communities organized around preserving, restoring, and upholding a healthy national identity with some allowance for other groups, but clearly diversity, again, one of these things, these are things that can be good, they can be bad. And I think that the American people deserve to have a conversation instead of a one-way railroading about where we are as a nation in terms of our diversity levels and whether it is appropriate for us to be encouraging more or less of it at this point in time. And I feel very confident that when the Republican Party asserts our side and our offer to the American people, I believe that we'll do quite well.
Excellent. All very well said. And before I ask the next question, I do have to remember to give a shout out to Roger Walrus, who connected us tonight, and to his podcasts, Ranting Ravens and Dissident Voice Radio. They've got 2 upcoming podcasts, which you guys should check out. And also the group Nationalists United. They're up to some good stuff there. So give them a shout out. They're our unofficial sponsors for this evening's conversation. Daryl, I want to ask
Kevin
you about...
DeKuyper. We got to give Kevin DeKuyper a shout out also, of Nationalists United. Terrific young man. Met with him several times, and he is a really sharp guy. So sorry to interrupt you, but I had to throw his name in there.
No, that's fine.
Yes, thank you to Roger Walrus. I know him by a couple other names as well, but he does a lot of great work, as do so many young men all across the country and across the world, frankly, at this point in time.
Good on you guys. Now, you are going to face a great deal of adversity from the establishments that I think are the main sort of pillars of power in what you described earlier, and I think quite correctly as the satanic theocracy that has become the sort of the puppet masters behind the running of America. And a few people in the chats tonight were talking about it, and I think it's really worth giving you a chance to comment on, how you intend to take on some of these major adversities. And I think the two big ones that people want to know about are the military-industrial complex and also the Federal Reserve Bank and the financial center of America. These are major pillars of current power that have become politicized, and I don't think they're necessarily going to be sympathetic to your message. So have you given some thought to how to rally around or under or through these groups?
Yeah, so I'll admit that frankly, economics is a topic that to me is of least personal interest. So it's something that I sort of do have to, and I think it's a very specialized topic, but certainly what the Federal Reserve has been doing, not just over the past decades, but frankly centuries, is unacceptable. So it is something that we are certainly going to have to assert ourselves into as well. And I mean, in my mind, I get passionate about boots on the ground in Hollywood, prosecuting academics and these types of things. But you're right, all these things are connected. I mean, Lucifer is running the world, and we have a military industrial complex that's tied into these things as well. I do believe that there is also a very good core of good American traditional generals in the military. And, I think that what we'll do is we will get them focused on cleaning up the miscreants and perverts in Hollywood, and we'll get them focused on that, and we'll get them focused out of projecting out into other parts of the world. At the same time, I do like to also say that I am not an isolationist, in the sense that, I do believe that we are all sort of one extended family, and I am not content to allow Europe to fall under Islam. So we have sort of a conglomerate of diversity here. They have a very real, close proximity to the Middle East, and what is occurring in their nations is much more aggressively Islamic. What you have occurring in places like France, if the leaders of these countries, if the Angela Merkels and Macrons of the world are not going to defend their people, it is going to be incumbent upon us as the leaders of the Christian world to do it for them. So I do believe in actually a global Christian authority, not so much the United Nations. That has become obviously very outdated and dysfunctional and crooked, but we're going to be looking now to organize a new global authority based around Christianity. So there's going to be a lot of alliances in Eastern Europe. I see countries like Russia, Hungary, Poland, even South America. I mean, they've got a great president, Jair Bolsonaro. That guy's a stud. So we're going to get all the alpha Christian nations together, and we're going to start asserting fiscal pressure first on these countries to stop things like propagandizing sodomy to children and pornography and all of these things. All the things the global community is doing now, putting pressure to encourage these bad things. Because so many things are just about inverting it. We're going to actually get the good nations together. And Europe now, just like the United States, they're all at crossroads. Which way are you going to go? And some nations are getting it. And they're saying, okay, we're drawing a line in the sand. Hungary, so many terrific pro-family agendas that you're seeing there. So they're a country that's in the right direction. And, you have other countries in Europe that are falling under the pressure. And I'm not going to let those countries just, I'm not going to let France become, an extension of Iran or what have you. France is a European country with a storied history. And, we will start by asserting fiscal pressure and the traditional way that the global community works to fight, to fight global issues. And to me, the major global issues that I see are white genocide, child sex trafficking, propagandizing to children, and frankly, some of the AI technologies. That stuff needs to be monitored more closely. We need to really put more thought into what science is doing, and making sure that science, while science is not inherently a bad thing, it can never take the place of God Almighty. And I think Russia is a country that has done a good job of keeping God at the top, and still advancing technologically. So we want to be communicating, dialoguing with these nations. So just like everything else, our military expeditions have been organized around spreading bad things. And this thing about we need to spread democracy. The good news of Western civilization is democracy. I don't necessarily think that it is. I think that democracy is a crowning jewel of Western civilization, and it is a crowning jewel that can really only be enjoyed in a proper Christian nation built from the ground up. The good news of Western civilization is the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that's what I want to be asserting on a global sense. And about the Fed and all the crooked things that goes on there. Yeah, we have a major issue with our currency, with our debt, all of these topics. And, we're going to need to get the mathematicians involved and, really start figuring out how we're going to tackle this stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we have currently is going to have to be dismantled, certainly.
Yeah, even what you were mentioning about supporting Europeans maintaining their sovereignty. Right now, the U.S. is undermining European sovereignty.
That's
There
right.
was a friend of mine was looking through some programs that are offering money to nonprofits to do various things, and a lot of times they're incentivizing them. There was $5 million to teach Serbians how to be gay. I don't think that's something that
Right.
most Serbian men are interested in having brought into their schools.
Right.
And it's not something, if they were interested in it, they would be paying it with their own money.
That's right.
And you go through a lot of the foreign aid is actually, it's essentially a war on other countries to undermine them by the
That's
same
right.
people that are undermining our countries, by the
That's
same
right.
people that are undermining the US. And you are right, we have to stop the undermining, but we've caused damage to each other. We have to act reciprocally. We have to undo the damage we caused. We have to right the wrongs that have been caused, even if they weren't caused by you and I, they were caused by people representing us, and we do have a responsibility to undo that. And to a large extent, that's going to mean helping Europeans return to the traditionalism that they had before we started poking them in the eye over and over again and undermining their situation. And you will find a huge change happens as the US takes cultural leadership in a direction that is more wholesome, in a direction that is just and upright. That will give a lot of young people who are really craving that are here in Europe, something to look up to. There's a lot of the people that recognize the world is wrong are very isolated, especially, I believe a lot of the COVID nonsense has been designed to isolate people who are waking up now and keep them from talking to their neighbors and prevent them from going, my neighbor came up to me yesterday and he said, if they start trying to do the vaccines, we have to organize a militia and resist. And I'm here in Europe, and he says, we've got to do something. He comes to me because he knows, one of the other reliable men in our area, and he says, we got to do something. He says, look, there's other places organizing and saying they will resist taking a vaccine that is unsafe. And people are looking to organize, looking to undo the damage that's been done. There needs to be leadership, and that's not just leadership within a country. That's leadership of certain countries taking the lead in that. We see the end of slavery came because the UK took a lead in ending slavery. They didn't get international support for it. They said, okay, this is wrong, we're going to end it. And then they sent their military to do it. And they said, someone's trading slaves, shoot them. Catch them, shoot them, or bring them back and we'll hang them. So they put a limit on it. And that's what men do. We put limits on what is acceptable in society, and then we enforce them. We back them up. with whatever force is necessary. Sometimes you can convince people. Sometimes you have to incrementally suppress what's going on, and that can take time, that can take effort. When it happens in one area, it gives hope to other people. It allows other people who also want to restore the righteousness of the West. It gives them the hope that it can be done. Right now, many people, and there's questions in the comments, I think it's too late. Oh no, we should have done this 30 years ago. You know, and I think those of us who have a better grip on history recognize that 30 years is really a day. You know, we can fix this. It is not too late yet. If it was too late, we wouldn't even be allowed to talk about fixing it. There will be a point where it's too late, but that's why we're starting now. And I think the backwards vision of looking 30 years, 40 years back and saying we should have started then, that will keep us from making actions in the here and now. You know, if we thought that should have been done something 30 years ago, yeah, it would have been great. But don't let that stop you from doing something today. So I really appreciate what you're doing in broaching topics that aren't within it's not really within the Overton window. Your position is just outside of the Overton window, which is important because it's just outside of ordinary conversation. And that is how we move and shift what is acceptable conversation. And it's how we shift from a defensive to an offensive mindset is by talking about what is outside of what is acceptable. Just a little bit outside, and we start to pull people towards that. And I think it's very important that that's going on. And we asked the other questions that James asked. Sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, I just want to add to that you know, what I appreciate in what you're doing, Daryl, is that you are getting started so early. You know, you're 4 years out from the year in which you actually intend to run. And that's absolutely perfect, you know, because these next 4 years are the critical years for America and for the rest of the world. 2020 has been the most accelerating year in the culture war, which has now become red hot and, you know, blazing hot in the cities of America right now. And what we're beginning to see are the emergence of folk heroes. There's a new folk hero in town. His name is Kyle Rittenhouse, and he has absolutely splashed across the world media with his actions recently. And of course, you know, very quickly people are quick to say, oh, he's a murderer, he's done the wrong thing, and, you know, he needs to be punished. But as the evidence emerges, we see that this young guy was out there acting as a medic, helping people on the other side of the battle who were injured in the protests. He was right there to help them, but because he was also armed and protecting businesses that they intended to set fire to, he was chased and acted in, you know, very well disciplined self-defense, and unfortunately it resulted in 2 deaths and 1 serious injury. Now, these deaths were clearly brought upon themselves by the psychotic and also, as we've discovered, criminal degenerates who were after him, and it's beginning to look like he is going to be an open and shut case of innocence. He is going to be, he must be found innocent of intentional homicide, and he must be acquitted on grounds of self-defense, because, you know, he seems to be, from everything we've seen so far, a genuinely good young Christian man doing good deeds, actually going out there and helping his community, doing his civic duty, defending his local businesses from criminals, and protecting and helping the criminals as they were getting hurt, and also doing what is necessary, which is defending himself when they attacked him with clear intent to kill. So I think in these times, as things are rapidly accelerating in America, the folk heroes are going to emerge, these people who are a little bit ahead of their time, just like you're a little bit ahead of your time. And 4 years from now, the culture is going to be in a place where we are desperate in the West for strong men. We are desperate for Christian theocracy. We are desperate for people to come in and say, yeah, we're going to put boots on the ground, and we are going to offensively push back against this satanic degeneracy that's taking over. People are going to catch up really, really quickly, and I think you've come in at a good time. And I guess we've got, you know, maybe 5 minutes left, and I'd love to just hand it over to you, Daryl, and let you you know, talk to our audience and wrap up there with anything you want to leave people with in considering the way forward for America and for the West over these next 4 years before we start to see, hopefully, your name on the GOP ticket.
Well, you know, my message to people, and thank you so much, and such insightful comments from both of you guys. My message to anybody that says it's too late is that's hogwash. And, you know, that to me is what losing politics looks like, is looking at how things are instead of how they can be. And what I would say is, if you went back 30 or 40 years and you showed this vision of this future and you said, is that possible? They would have said, absolutely, that is absurd, that is impossible. And it isn't. It is very possible when you have will and you have a vision. And the left has asserted a vision, and it is a very disastrous vision. And we have to assert another vision. And strength wins. And this is the dynamic that we saw in 2016. And, I never thought that Donald Trump was the savior of the United States of America. I do think very clearly that you can see God's hand at work in that election. So there are signs for encouragement that perhaps there is a bit of divine grace coming down to help the faithful remnant. But the dynamic is that, for better or worse, he was the strongest person on that stage as a Republican, and he was the strongest person in the general election. Strength wins. And, I know that for this entire generation, it feels like you're always swimming upstream and you're being pushed on the bottom of the stack. And on top of being put on the bottom of the stack, you're being told that you're always on the top of the stack. And, the truth is that what's been occurring is that, fish that have to swim upstream become stronger. We are a very strong generation that emerged out of this. And simultaneously, our opponents are atrophying and they're becoming weaker and weaker. So in terms of being outside of the Overton window, I'm very encouraged because I've actually been saying these things for going on 15, 20 years. And my vision, what I've seen has been, basically since I was in high school, watching John McCain and George W. Bush battle it out for the GOP in 99 and 2000. What's been occurring is a very gradual shift. And what happened was, I've just been talking out into the abyss for all these years. I have a couple hip friends that I could communicate with, but, this internet culture rose up around it. And all of a sudden, 2014, 2015, 2016, I'm seeing these ideas start to percolate. And, I'm not a guy who just reads everything out there. And I see some really encouraging things, which is that we're all uniquely arriving not only at the same direction, but down to using the same terms, the same jargon, things like degeneracy, which I've always used. I get into the communities, and this is a term that we're all naturally arriving there. It's a very beautiful thing. And the trajectory of where things are going, again, 2024, you can look in I believe in my yearbook quote, it says, I'll see you in 2024. 2024 is when the whole thing lines up. And I think that we're going to be perfectly there. And, I'm not a person that accepts a title as a radical, and I don't feel that way at all. And I'm not. And I don't think anybody has the right to tell me that I'm not. I am saying things that every traditional Western politician had said for thousands of years up until about 1990. So, if the left has the right to talk about these things, there's nobody that's going to stop us from talking about these things. And we are going to break through because we are stronger. We have had to become stronger. We've had to overcome so much adversity and so many personal challenges. And as we get closer and closer there, so you have to revel in that. You have to get psyched up about it. We have a really, really beautiful challenge before us. I mean, we are quite literally the last line of defense between thousands of years of civilization and tradition. We are quite literally the last line of defense. And to make things even more beautiful, we are wholly inequipped for it. We are the least well-equipped, least battle-ready generation in the history of the United States of America, or at least we were that. So we're the bad news bears, but we're gonna actually show what we can do, and you have to get psyched up about that. And I know that you guys are getting psyched up about it. There's a lot of mischief and wit and energy, and there's this cat and mouse. We're the Judd Nelson generation, and the leftist authority is just trying to keep us down, but we just keep punking them. And in 2024, we're going to come around and we're going to slug them right in the face with a firm right hook. So I'll leave it with that. God bless you, gentlemen. Everybody watching, be good to your women. Be good to don't hate on the girls. We need to work together. We need to come back together as men and women. Be supportive of your brother. You know, let things go. When you don't be afraid to aspire to goodness, even if you've got a tattoo on your arm. Recognize that we've all got tattoos on our arms. I mean, I don't have any tattoos, but we all have things, and that doesn't mean that we can't assert and strive for goodness, because we're all ultimately going to fall short of that perfection. But it's our responsibility to stand on that. It's not about us. And what's going to come out, there's going to be all sorts of attacks, and you know, you're going to find out that I'm just a normal guy and I'm not a perfect person. And you know, if it was about me, we wouldn't stand a chance. But it's not about me. It's about Christ. We stand on firm ground. We stand for God Almighty. Think about David versus Goliath. That's who you are. You're David, and you're staring down Goliath, and you're nothing but a little boy that nobody thought had a chance of anything, but you've got a sling, and you know that the victory has already been won, and you are standing on the side of victory. It's just our job to die fighting on the right side. So stay positive and have fun, stay safe, socialize, be good to each other. And I love all of you guys. I'm sending you a hug. If anybody wants to talk, I'm always there. Message me, call me. God bless you guys. We're going to have a party at the White House. You two are both going to be in the White House should we get there. We're going to be sitting there. We're going to have some steaks, and we're going to have a good time. We'll have a nice prayer.
Excellent. I look forward to that.
Sounds great.
And I'll certainly, I'm sure Noah as well, will hold you to that. And Daryl, I feel like we've stepped in at the ground floor of something tremendous and mighty that's growing here. And I wish you all the best. I'll be praying for you as you continue to campaign. As I said, I'm very glad you're getting in nice and early. 4 years is going to be a great time as the world changes for you to grow in yourself and grow in your message. But I'm liking everything I'm hearing. You're going to have my full support. And I hope to see you in the White House in 2024.
Thank you. But hey, when's your album dropping?
December, with God willing.
It's beautiful. I love to see beautiful art, and yeah, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today. This has been another tremendous conversation. This is Daryl Kane for Kane 2024. This has been Patriarch Hour with myself and Noah Revoy. And we wish you all a fantastic week, and we'll see you for the next episode next week at the same time. And we'll have another guest, hopefully. If not, it'll be another juicy conversation between Noah and I. God bless. Take care, and we will see you next time.